Hey, brand builder, Rory Vaden here. Thank you so much for taking the time to check out this interview. As always, it's our honor to provide it to you for free. And wanted to let you know there's no big sales pitch or anything coming at the end. However, if you are someone who is looking to build and monetize your personal brand, we would love to talk to you and get to know you a little bit and hear about some of your dreams and visions and share with you a little bit about what we're up to see if we might be a fit. So if you're interested in a free strategy call with someone from our team, we would love to hear from you. You can do that at brandbuildersgroup.com/podcall, brandbuildersgroup.com/podcall. We hope to talk to you soon.
I'm so excited to introduce to you a longtime friend and mentor of mine named Chester Elton. We haven't actually talked for years, but early in my career, I talked to Chester several times. AJ and I talked several times with Chester, and he's been a huge encouragement to me. And he's a great example, him and his business partner, Adrian, of owning and dominating a space, specifically when it comes to workplace culture. These guys have created the space. They've owned it. They have data from over 1 million working adults. Chester is the co-founder of a company called FindMojo, which is a global assessment company. He is the author of multiple New York Times and Wall Street Journal best-selling books, including All In, The Carrot Principle, Leading with Gratitude, and then their newest one, Anxiety at Work. Between all their books, Adrian Gostick is his writing partner's name. Their books have been translated into 30 languages and have sold over 1.5 million copies. Chester's been on the Today Show, 60 Minutes. He appears in major media all over the globe and is just a really, really amazing guy. And so you got to hear some wisdom direct from the source. So Chester, thanks for being here, man.
Well, Rory, listen, first and foremost, thanks for inviting me. It's always great to reconnect with old friends. And thank you for those kind words. You know, I look at the work that you and AJ have done, the stories that you've shared, your ups and downs. You know, you're never down, you're never out, you're always taking the stairs. See what I did there? And I just love your spirit and the way you and AJ are building your family and building your career. So a delight to be here with you today.
Yeah, you know, this is a funny fact that people probably don't know, but one of the most influential, the ways you've been most influential in our life is you told us directly, we need to start making children. And that conversation stuck with us so emphatically, like in our mind, because you were like, you have to have kids. You're going to love it. It's great. The world needs more children from people like you guys. And just, you know, so thank you for that. Because I think last time we talked, I don't think I had kids.
You did not. So I'm so glad that you took my advice. You know, it is interesting and it's so easy to get caught up in, you know, what you're doing. And you and AJ love what you do. There's nothing wrong with that. That sometimes you put aside some of the things that really make life rich and important and meaningful. And certainly that has to do with raising a family. And I know you love being a dad. You got 2 kids now. You guys are doing your part. So good for you.
Yeah, well, we're doing it. And you know, nowadays we're trying to help people build and monetize their personal brand, which of course, you know, made for an obvious conversation with you. I know that Anxiety at Work, you said, is your 14th book. And, you know, one of the things that we're always trying to help people do is figure out their uniqueness and find a space that they can own. And I feel like you and Adrian have always been so consistent and, you know, owning the culture space, but also data. Like when I think of you, another part of your brand that really speaks to me is this like research and science and the data component of it. I wanted to get your thoughts on how do you approach a research project? Like for the average person who isn't, you know, you've got this long background in researcher. Now you have your own assessment company. Like, how do you set about, you know, just kind of putting your mind around the idea of conducting research and what counts as research? And, you know, how do you just, you know, think about it?
Yeah, a great question. You know, we early on figured out that the data gives you all kinds of credibility, right? And so Willis Towers Watson graciously gave us access to their database, an international database on employee engagement. And
Mm.
that's a very rich area to mine. As you recall, we started our writing careers around recognition in the workplace. We wrote, the carrot principle and a carrot a day and the daily carrot principle. There
I
are a
mean,
lot
you
of
guys were the
carrots.
you guys were the carrot guys for a long time. Yeah.
Absolutely. And in fact, if you Google carrot guys, we pop up. And so recognition was the space where we really, cut our teeth. And then it became very obvious to us that it wasn't the recognition space that we were really in. It was really the culture space, because we never met a great leader, a great team, or a great culture that didn't celebrate their successes. And so we transitioned from being, strictly recognition to being culture. And our landmark book there was the All In, how the best managers create a culture of belief that drives big results. And that really gave us a bigger canvas to paint on. And that's where we started getting recognized as, as leadership gurus and culture gurus with the global gurus list, actually, and HR lists and on and on, because of the research. It wasn't a feeling. It wasn't like, oh, this looks or sounds right. It was rock solid data. And when your database gets, over 1 million, which is way more than you need, as you well know, it gives you that credibility. Now, what we also wanted to do was say, okay, well, what proprietary insights can we have? And so we developed our own assessment called the Motivators Assessment. If you've taken like Strength Finders, that's what you're good at, or Myers-Briggs, that's who you are. The Motivators Assessment, we felt, sort of filled in the gap between who I am, what I'm good at, and tell me what I'm passionate about. And that's that Venn diagram, that if I know who I am, I know what my strengths are, and I can marry that with my passions. Boy, that's productivity, that's joy coming to work, and all the things associated with it. So that gave us some proprietary insights. And then as we started to publish more and more around teams and leadership, Leading with Gratitude was a book. Our timing was impeccable, Roy. We launched that book in March of 2000. We bought every available front of store space at airports, because that's where people buy business books. We even said, if you buy this book, we'll give you a pair of gratitude socks, because this book will knock your socks off. And literally 2 weeks later, you couldn't find, a mouse in an airport. And while
This is March of 2020.
Yes, and so
Wow.
and yet the timing was also good, because it was a time where people needed to step back and say, I know what I'm losing. What am I grateful for? And it gave us a great opportunity to get out there with leaders and cultures and say, yes, I understand that you can't do a lot of the things that you used to do before. I understand that life is more difficult in homeschooling and so on. And yet in all of this, what are we grateful for? So it gave us a wonderful opportunity to take a deep dive into an emotional connection to gratitude and leading with gratitude. And we have some wonderful stories and partners. Well, our publisher at the time, and still is our publisher, Harper Business, Adrian and his son had been working on a father-son project around anxiety. Anthony Gostick, his son, had suffered from severe anxiety since a little kid. One of my sons also had that happen, and took the project to Harper Business. And they said, well, this isn't, you have no credibility in the self-help section. This is a business book. People are suffering from anxiety at work like never before. So you wouldn't normally publish a book every year. A book is a big project.
Sure.
Well, with COVID, not traveling, not speaking, we had the time. We cranked it out very quickly. And this is by far, Rory, our most important book. Our favorite book is Leading with Gratitude. Our most important book is Anxiety at Work, because it is so mission driven, because it fits neatly under that umbrella of culture. You can't have a high performance culture. You can't be a high performing person if you're suffering from severe anxiety. So the two married up so nicely, and we've had a lot of fun and a lot of success.
So did you start an assessment? Did you do how did you build assessment around the anxiety work to create, like, or did you pull it out of the Motivators Assessment? Is that where you pulled the data out of?
Excellent question and wonderful insight. You've clearly asked a lot of questions before, Rory. You're good at this. What happened is, with the database, and we've had over 100,000 people take the Motivators Assessment, is we were able to parse out generational differences. what were the generational differences in motivation? And then as we looked at the really current and timely research around uh, who is suffering the most from anxiety at work, it was obvious that and I'll give you some numbers just really quick. In 2018, about 18% of employees referenced some kind of severe anxiety in the workplace. So 1 in 5, basically. By 2020, the middle of 2020, that had jumped to 30% overall. When you look, though, at millennials and Gen Z, early 20s to early 30s, it was over 40%. It was 42%. On top of that, you took specifically millennials and Gen Z. 75% said that they had left a job recently due to a mental health episode. So really, the number one issue in the workplace, generationally, we were able to see those insights through our motivators assessments about what matters to you. It's family, it's impact, it's learning, coupled with outside data that said this group suffers more than any other. And it was really a remarkable confluence of data, stories, interviews, and then tools to deal with how do I reduce my anxiety in the workplace.
Interesting. So how did you build the motivators assessment? Like what did you do? I mean, obviously you go, hey, let's build our own assessment. You kind of figure out this space. You go, hey, there's a test that does this. There's a test that does this. We would like to have a test that does this. Right. And then what do you do after that?
Well, you go find people that build amazing assessments. And that's what we did. We contacted Gene Graves and Travis Bradbury, who produced the Emotional Intelligence 2.0 assessment. And you'll love the conversation. And this is, building your personal brand, right? When you're building your personal brand, what is your niche? Where can, as you say, where can you dominate? And then what makes you different than everybody else? And of course, having proprietary data does that in a brilliant way. And so you'll love the conversation, though. So we called up Gene and Travis and we said, hey, we've got this idea, and it'd be identifying people's passions. It's what motivates me, put your passions to work. And we self-published the book around that and all the training and so on. And they said, yeah. So we had 2 or 3 conversations, and it was not an inexpensive proposition. I mean, if you want to do it well and have it third-party vetted and have it be a valid assessment, it takes time, and you want experts, and of course, experts are expensive. So it came down to this, and you'll love this, Rory, because it really does come down to personal relationships in everything you do, right? They said, okay, well, we have 3 criteria as to whether we'll take a project on. And they are these. Said, first is it interesting work for us? So think about that. They said, we get approached all the time to do stuff like this. So first and foremost, will it be challenging and will it be interesting for us to create this assessment? And the answer to that is yes. Secondly, is we have to ask the question, will it help people? Like, will it be helpful? Will it help change the world and make it a little better place? And as we think about what you want to do and how we could put this together, the answer to that question is yes. The answer to the third question is by far the most important, and it's this: do we like you? Because you're going to spend a lot of time together, right? And if we don't like you, it just will not be worth it. So luckily, they checked the third box as well. And it took us about 1.5 years to develop it. We had it third-party vetted, did all kinds of alpha and beta testing. And now we've got this wonderful assessment that gives us incredible insights, generationally, industry, gender, and so on. And
see, I love that. I mean, I think thank you for sharing that, because it's really helpful to go, for me to sit down and create an assessment that passes all the statistical validity and probabilities and margin of error and all that is super intimidating. But to go, oh, like anything, you pay some money, you hire the person, and you go out and you get it, you make an investment and you get it done. And then you have this proprietary thing. So I love that. And I love what you're saying about how proprietary data helps you dominate. So you create this assessment, you're measuring, a bunch of people are taking it, you're drawing insights from that you're drawing insights from that to create the books. How do you actually sell the books once you have them? Because it's I feel like everyone that talks about books, it's really about how to get the book deal, how to come up with the idea, how to write the book, how to publish the book. But nobody ever talks about what do you actually do that sells books, like that gets a lot of people to buy? I mean, you sold 1.5 million books. Like, how do you do that?
Yeah, I think we're actually right at about 1.7 these days. I'll tell you. You say, how do you sell 1 million books? You sell them one at a time. You really do. It's really interesting. Back to the personal brand, that then we'll circle back to how do you sell books. It's really interesting. Like you say, you just don't go create an assessment by yourself. You find experts. You live in Nashville. I live in Jersey. In Jersey, there's a saying that, look, I know a guy who knows a guy, right? You get your network. I know a guy who knows a guy who can do that for you. You know what I'm saying? And so you surround yourself with really good and really smart people. It's the same thing in publishing. Given that we've written 14 books now, we've made every mistake humanly possible, and we've actually helped about a dozen people get published. And so you surround yourself with great people. I'll tell you a really interesting story about leading with gratitude. We always hire a personal editor to edit our books. As we put the concept together, we go to the publishers, they buy the idea, they buy the marketing plan. Not only do they need to love the concept, they need to love how are you going to go to market. In other words, they can print it, they can get you distribution. They've got a PR team that can help you, get on the various podcasts and get on various shows and so on. It's really up to you as the authors to sell the books. And so what does your network look like? So, we've got 625,000 followers on LinkedIn. We've got an internal newsletter where we have just under 100,000 subscribers within LinkedIn. We write business books, so we place our bet on LinkedIn. If you're a different kind of author, you might place your bet on Instagram or Facebook or whatever. The point is that, find your community, build that brand in the community, build your reputation, and then build your followership so that when you put stuff out, people will view it. It's so interesting that when you build your brand, first off, and we did this with an ad agency in New York years and years ago, when we were writing all our books with carrots in the title, said, what is your noble cause? What is it that really is going to bring people to you? Is it, breast cancer awareness, right? Is it autism? What is it? And for ours was creating great cultures where people were excited to come to work, where they believed what they did mattered, they made a difference. And when they made a difference, it was noticed and celebrated. It was that simple. And people said, great, that's a noble cause. Then the second piece is, are you the spokesperson or the spokes, in our case, there's two of us, and are you likable? And never underestimate likable. Are you really emotionally connected to your cause? Do people want to hear from you? Do they trust you? Do they like you? And so we were able to check that box. Adrian and I both, very passionate about what we do. We're also passionate about taking what you learn in the workplace into your personal lives, to your families, and making families stronger and communities stronger. So they said, check the box. The third one was really interesting. They said, do you have a symbol that people can rally around? And you think about, breast cancer awareness, it's the pink ribbon. And how that has manifested itself. When you can get the world's toughest athletes, NFL football players wearing pink cleats, you've arrived, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was very identifiable. And so for us, it was the symbol of the carrot, which we continue to use in our work and so on. It's very simple. The carrot is the positive reward for all your hard work. We even, created a little mascot, and that was the fourth thing. Do you have a mascot? A nice to have, not a must have. And so we have Garrett the carrot. So wherever we go and we engage people, we give them a carrot or a small reward. Well, as you build that brand and you build that network and that followership, then it becomes easier for you to say, and by the way, if you understand the data, if you listen to the stories, which are the case studies, that data gives you credibility, the stories are what people remember, then here are the tools. And you find the tools in our books. So you're going to want to buy the book. So, you build your followership with your podcast, with your newsletter, with your followership on whatever platform makes sense. You start making lists, you get known as an authority in your space. You build that marketing machine, and it makes it easier to sell books. It's a lot of work because selling books, as you know, that's hard work.
And is the assessment, how do people, is the assessment free? Does it come with the book? Is it, because like some of them you have to buy the book and it comes with the assessment? Is like how do you do it?
Yeah, we've done all of the above, Rory. We first published a book called "What Motivates Me: Put Your Passions to Work," and the code was in the book, very much like Strength Finders and Emotional Intelligence 2.0. Later, we actually pulled the book from the market because it was cannibalizing our training somewhat, and then it was simply online. It's a digital version. It's very, very scalable. We had the Culture Works, which was our training company. We've now moved to strictly a data company, which is FindMojo. And there is a freemium model. So you can go on and you can take the assessment and we'll give you a part of the data. If you want the whole report, you pay a small fee to get that. And then the work that we've really discovered is very helpful with the motivators assessment is in building strong teams. As a team leader, I understand my motivators. Then I understand the individual motivators of each person on my team. And each team member understands their motivators as well. Now, it becomes really interesting when you start to bleed into other platforms and distribution models. We're working on a very interesting platform right now on, can we tie a platform where leaders can come in, adjust their behaviors, do very specific things, log that online to reduce anxiety, to build stronger teams. And we're hoping to launch that at the end of July. Well, that's where you're making a huge difference. And that's where you're using your data and your insights to then change behaviors for the better, to create better workplaces, stronger teams, better leaders.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. So I want to ask you a little deep dive about LinkedIn, because you guys do dominate. I mean, you dominate on LinkedIn, which, you know, is really smart for what you're saying. It's like, this is where my audience is. And, you know, and I feel like, you know, you're more there like than on Instagram, right? So it's like,
oh, sure. Yeah.
You know, you go follow what you're doing on LinkedIn. You're like, oh my gosh, these people are celebrities. On Instagram, not as much. Your audience isn't there to the same extent. So how have you done that on LinkedIn? Like, I'm curious specifically about what has worked well for you on LinkedIn.
Well, yeah. And you know, because you grew up in sales and I grew up in sales, you have to place your bet. You know, if you try to be too many things to too many people, you end up being nothing to everybody, right? And so it became very clear for us that, you know, LinkedIn was the place where business people go, and we write business books. So it was a bit of a no-brainer. Early on in LinkedIn, again, this is, you know, surrounding yourself with really good people. I had a very good friend who worked at LinkedIn here in New York. And he literally, we go to the same church. And he came up to me and he said, you know, I love your books and I love all the carrot stuff and everything. He says, you know, I'm at LinkedIn. They're starting an influencers program and you should be an influencer. So we got in very early, you know, when there were only a few hundred. Then it went to be, you know, over 1,000. And then they pared it back, which was really interesting. If you weren't using your LinkedIn influencer platform over a certain period of time, they pulled it, which makes sense. You know, if you're not going to use it, why bother? And that was a huge break for us. Now you have to be invited to be an influencer. You can make yourself aware. It's an invitation. So again, if you say, oh, great. For example, I had an author contact me and she said, well, I would love to be an influencer. Can you introduce me? I said, yes, I can. Understand, it's an invitation. And as I look at your profile, you have 1,500 or maybe she had 2,500 followers. I go, that's not influencer status. You know, you're not going to become an influencer if you have 1,500 followers. You know, 500,000 is probably 250,000, but you get the idea. Is you have to have a certain amount of gravitas. And then that influencer program was a huge boon to us, because as they would start to pilot new programs, they would go to their influencers first. When they started to do newsletters, they said, we want you to do a newsletter. I said, great. What is that? How do you do that? Right. So they coach you through it. And they said, the great thing about a newsletter is when you post something, it goes to your followers, right? And to a fraction of your followers, really. A newsletter goes to your followers' inbox because they subscribe to it. They ask for it. And we started with a newsletter once a month. And I think we ended up, you know, early on with like 1,500 subscribers. And then every month we would publish, it would grow. And then they suggested that we go to twice a month. I think once a week is too much. I mean, I I want to hear from my wife at least every week, but I don't think I want to hear from me, every week. And so we went to twice a week. Well, we just passed the year benchmark. So we've had we went to twice a week. I think we had like 18 newsletters. We're just under 100,000 subscribers, where our message goes right to their inbox. They encouraged us to do a podcast, which we do with Anxiety at Work. Wonderful guests. They said, we're doing LinkedIn Live. We'd like to do a LinkedIn Live show. We did. We have a LinkedIn Live show every Thursday on Leading with Gratitude that then we turn into a podcast. And so, it's layer upon layer upon layer as you build it up. So we've got our followership. We've got our newsletter. We've got our LinkedIn Live show. We've got our podcast. I started a really just goofy thing where when COVID started, I just post a photograph every day of something I'm grateful for. And it's amazing. You get 30,000 hits on that, and depending what it is. And I'm probably like you, Rory. I'll post something and it'll go phenomenally well. And I go, well, what was it about that that made it great? And I can never figure it out. I'll write this article for our newsletter and I think that is genius. Like, Chester,
they're going to love it. They're going to love it. It's
there
was viral for sure.
There's a Pulitzer. There's going to probably be a movie deal, and nobody, and it doesn't resonate. And then you'll do something that'll take you 10 minutes to write, and you put it, and people go nuts. So the point that I'm making there is, so much of it is trial and error. The thing is to really be consistent. So, I mean, every day I'm posting some little photograph. Every 2 weeks, we've got a newsletter. Every week, we've got a LinkedIn Live show. Every week, we're dropping our podcast. And that's where you get into a lot of places. Now, as my friend from Texas would say, it's a long road to a small house. Circling back to how do you sell books? Often it takes 4 to 5 hits for somebody to say, yeah, I'll buy that book. Unless it's your friend that says, you know what, Rory, you got to buy this book. And you say, great, I'll buy it. Other than that, they hear about it on a podcast. They see it posted in the newsletter. You're doing an interview on another podcast. You're getting, on and on. It's about 4 or 5 hits. That's why you've got to be in so many places. And that's why what you put out has to be quality work. Again, why we hire internal editors to make sure that not only are we on message, the product that we're putting out is world-class.
Mm-hmm. Gosh, that's so good. And such a good reminder of just the reality of what it takes. Thank you for this, Chester. Where do you want people to go if to learn about you guys and your work? Clearly, you're on LinkedIn.
And that part's easy. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
LinkedIn is where you can find us all over the place. GostickandElton.com is our website. With our latest podcast, wherever you get your podcast, Anxiety at Work, highly recommend it. The reason we're so passionate about this particular subject and why I really encourage people to go there is that only 1 in 10 employees feel comfortable talking about anxiety to their bosses. It's the number one issue in the workplace. And if you can't talk about it, you can't solve it. Do you know what I mean? We've got to create safer places. And so I really would recommend that you listen to the podcast. So many leaders, many of them entrepreneurs, who you would never think have had a bad day in their lives, have suffered from severe anxiety. And by them sharing their stories, it makes it safe for you to share your story and to build not just a better place to work, but to build a better life. So LinkedIn, GostickandElton.com, our podcast, sign up for our LinkedIn newsletter. It's all real positive stuff. And listen to Rory Vaden, and whatever he does, or whatever he says, just do it, because he's a great advocate for not just building better brands, but building better lives. And always a pleasure to be with you, Rory.
Oh, always a pleasure, my brother. It's good to see you, and we'll be watching closely.
Thanks so much. Take care and be well.